Let's talk to political commentator Albie Amankona. Good to see you this morning.
Good morning.
It's interesting. There may be people who listen to... I've forgotten the name now already.
Melanie's.
What Melanie said and said, what's she talking about? I just noticed in the Sun's got an opinion poll this morning. Tory's on 34%, unchanged. Labour on 37%, +1. That's too close to call if there's a general election.
That is a very interesting poll, and I actually saw it as well, because the polls seem to be so close that actually the Conservatives and Labour are within a rounding error of each other. And really, after the by-election results that we saw last week, you might expect the polls to be further apart. But I think one thing which is important to consider, which is if you add up all of the left-wing votes in the polls, you actually get to 60% for the Greens, the Lib Dems and Labour versus, the rest for the Conservatives. So if people were going to be tactically voting, like they did in Tiverton and Honiton and in Wakefield, that might be a problem for the Conservative Party.
But it's also, this poll coming out, it's in the midterms. Yes, it's after two disastrous by-elections, but it is still midterm. And the government would never usually expect to be that high in the opinion ratings midterm, would they?
No, and that is certainly a line which the Conservative Party has been using to justify, I think, every single by-election loss of the last year, and there have been 4 of them. And also the May local elections as well. But there also comes to a point where we have to start thinking about the next general election. A lot of Tory MPs are concerned that maybe we won't win a majority at the next general election with Boris Johnson as Prime Minister.
Yeah, but it's who they would get that would beat him. I mean, even at the moment, with everything that is going against the Prime Minister, and there is a lot, you look at who would make the best Prime Minister. Boris Johnson holds a 1-point lead over Sir Keir Starmer. I mean, everything's playing in Sir Keir Starmer's favour here. He's still not making headway. He's not cutting through as a potential Prime Minister. It
is surprising that with all of the trouble that the Conservative Party are in, Keir Starmer can't seem to cut through to the British public. If we think back to the 1990s when it was John Major versus Tony Blair was making mincemeat of Tory Prime Minister who was failing, and Keir Starmer's simply not able to do that.
And Keir Starmer is calling for an election now, really, in the earlier than having to wait for the ultimate time. Of course, I suppose he would, wouldn't he? There's nothing much else he can do. But do you wonder whether there are any maybe backbench or the loyal backbench Tory MPs who may be becoming more and more disloyal? Do you think maybe an early election, would be a good idea? Let's test the waters.
A good idea for who? I think that's...
Well, that's what I'm wondering, yeah. Who would benefit?
I'm not sure that the Conservative Party would benefit from an early general election, just given where we are in the polls today. Yes, OK, not very far behind Labour, but given the electoral results of the last year, none of them have been good. So if anyone's thinking we should do a general election in the autumn, I do not personally think that would be a good idea.
No, what about... Sorry. What about a reshuffle?
Yes, I think a reshuffle is coming. I think there's one set for July. There will have to be a reshuffle now because Oliver Dowden stood down from the co-chairmanship of the Conservative Party. Some people are saying perhaps he might move the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, to that position because of her connections to the party grassroots.
It's just fascinating, though, in all of this. I do wonder if there is a temptation by Number 10, and we know Boris does not always behave in the way you would expect, that perhaps he's just going to say, blow it. Let's have a general election. Let's test all this. The backbenchers aren't happy. The Labour Party want an election. Let's just do it.
I would wish the Prime Minister well if that's what he wanted to do. But as I said before, I do not think that will be a good idea. What the Prime Minister needs to be focusing on is setting out an economic plan for this country. Apparently, we're hearing one might be coming in July. Is focusing on the cost of living crisis and focusing on solving the situation in Ukraine. So at the next general election, in 2 years' time, in May 2024, we're entering that general election on a solid, good footing to win as best as we can.
This would be a good excuse, though, wouldn't it, for then Rishi Sunak to have to say, right, here's a load of tax cuts, here's a reduction on the green levy, here's all the things that everyone's calling for to become more conservative.
To happen now.
Yeah. Do that now. And then...
But there's no doubt, isn't there? I mean, Boris Johnson has a massive majority in the House at the moment. He would definitely lose the massiveness of that majority, even if he did squeeze in again.
Precisely. You speak about the massive majority that Boris Johnson has now. All of those things, Stephen, that you just mentioned, there's nothing stopping the Conservative Party from doing that now. We just need to get on with it and do it.
Well, that's an argument a lot of people make. I guess there is this idea, so the perception at the moment that they're keeping their powder dry ahead of a general election. They want a carrot ahead of the general election, don't they?
But I think I would argue that what are we waiting for? Because people want to see this Conservative government succeeding now. Conservative backbench MPs want to see this Conservative government succeeding now. It was just over a year ago that we were winning by-elections in Hartlepool, and a year later we've lost 4 by-elections. We didn't do very well in the May local elections, and the approval ratings for the Prime Minister are poor.
What about, can I just ask about, talk about what backbenchers want? And you know this, and I know this from my contacts and all the rest of it. In the papers, they talk about backbenchers squabbling like children. The Tory backbenchers are squabbling like children. And part of what's driving them is their own ambition to think, get Boris out, maybe I can wangle in with a candidate, I can get myself, climb the greasy pole. There's an awful lot of that going on.
Absolutely, that's politics. And I think what you'll find with a lot of the rebels, or some of the rebels, are people who probably would never get positions in Boris Johnson's government. And so that, yes, you could make the argument that perhaps they're manoeuvring because they want to get their candidate in so that they could have government positions at some point in the future. But others, just on principle, want to see a Conservative Prime Minister succeeding, and they don't feel that that man is Boris Johnson.
On the other hand, maybe not. They must be thinking, give him a bit more time, because circumstances have not been kind to this Prime Minister, have they? He came in thinking he was going to be the great Brexit Prime Minister with an agenda of exciting things to do, and suddenly he got slap-banged with, a pandemic, which has cost the country a fortune. And he also had to sort of do all sorts of things that don't feel very Conservative. So perhaps a lot of Conservative loyalists would think, give him a chance, give him a couple of years to prove that he can be a Conservative Prime Minister.
Absolutely, I think we should give him a chance, but a lot of people have been saying that since January, and things have been getting worse, not better, which is why I say with an 80-seat majority, we can take these Conservative measures to grow the economy. We can take these Conservative measures to control immigration. And we don't seem to be doing that. We don't seem to be taking the opportunities of Brexit forward. I'd like to see more of that happen. So by the time that we get to the next general election, we can enter with a strong footing and be positive about the future of Britain.
OK. Albie, thank you very much indeed.